This will sound very strange, but the prophetic football game between the Dallas Cowboys and New York Giants, in which Dallas won 40-0 during a heavy rain, which hints at the 40 days of rain in the account of Noah's flood, is a major prophetic sign from God that is predicting that there will be dirty bombs, 2 of them, that will explode in Manhattan, New York City, on December 2nd, 2023. And there will be a mass evacuation, and is also predicting that Kamala Harris's plane will crash on October 17th, 2023, and is also predicting that the alien deception, demons pretending to be aliens, will symbolically begin on November 11th, 2023, and is predicting that singer-songwriter Paul Simon will die on January 3rd, 2024, and is predicting that the San Francisco 49ers will beat the Miami Dolphins in the Super Bowl in 2024, and is also predicting that the beginning of the zombie pandemic, the mass demonic possession of those who have taken the mark of the Antichrist, will begin on April 20th, 2024, and is also revealing that the date of the resurrection rapture, the evacuation of God's faithful, will be on May 26th, 2024. The date that this video is posted proves that these predictions are being made ahead of time, as do these time-stamped emails and forensic notes PDF documents. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. This very important video explains part of God's big picture of prophetic signs, patterns, and connections, and an important story God told that pointed to September 25th, 2023, regarding the prediction for an explosion of a dirty bomb or suitcase nuke in Manhattan, New York City, and mass evacuation from Manhattan Island on December 2nd, 2023. September 25th ended up being the penultimate step in the trail of signs leading to December 2nd. For a full explanation of the very important prophetic signs that occurred on September 25th, including the 67th Annual International Atomic Energy Agency Conference that revealed adding 67 days to September 25th to reach December 2nd, the predicted date for the dirty bomb or suitcase nuke explosion in Manhattan, watch the amazing video titled Bomb in New York City on 12/2, December 2nd, equals 343 firefighters lost on 9/11 prophecy. All right, today is September 11th, 2023. Yesterday was Sunday, today is Monday, and yesterday was the first weekend of the NFL season, and God used this for some prophetic signs, which is typical. God has most frequently, very, very frequently used sports signs. And I know that's strange sounding for some people. Well, why would God do that? Well, because we watch sports. And furthermore, he created sports. He created everything. And so if it's a surprise to you that God uses sports, well, this is a major way in which he uses signs. If you think about it, it would be the case because this is a very simple way to communicate. There is a lot of symbolism that can be used. Numbers, also teams, cities, what they symbolize, team names, players, their history, etc. It just goes on and on. So sports are very, very, very important in God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel. And so let's get into what happened yesterday. The NFL is furthermore, the NFL is one of the major outlets for God's prophetic signs. And we had this game between Dallas and the New York Giants. This is very important. God is using the city Dallas as symbolism for the American church, but specifically the American Evangelical Church. I'll just give you just one of countless examples. The number 9 is the most important number in God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel. And as from the Bible, it symbolizes God's judgment. And there was a prophetic football game in Dallas, a nationally televised game, which made it all the more prophetic, between Dallas and Philadelphia, another city that God uses as symbolism for the church. This was during the game at 9 p.m., the nationally televised Sunday night game, the only game being played at the time, in other words. At 9 p.m., 9 tornadoes touched down in Dallas during the game. And one of the tornadoes touched down on 9th Street and destroyed half of a church, which is symbolic of God being very displeased with half of the church. In other words, it's a division. God is in the process of dividing the chaff from the wheat, right? And not the sheep from the goats. Well, actually, yes, the sheep from the goats, because the true interpretation of that, the correct interpretation of that passage, that parable that Jesus told, was not a separation between Christian believers and non-believers. This was actually, the nations are the nations that knew God. But I don't want to get off onto too much of a theological discussion here with this video, which will be difficult because this is about Dallas. But anyway, and that tornado, the 9 tornadoes that touched down on 9th Street, was exactly 9 months after the prophetic blood moon lunar eclipse that was centered over America. Exactly 9 months after that. So, and as a result of the game, the Dallas Cowboys took a beating by the Philadelphia Eagles. There was more prophetic details within that, but to keep it short and sweet, after the game, the coach said, "We need to take a look at ourselves in the mirror." This was a sign from God for the American Evangelical Church to take a look at itself in the mirror because it isn't right. And the Church of Philadelphia, which is the team Dallas played, Philadelphia, is the only church that Jesus said that he wrote letters to in the book of Revelation that would be raptured. And this is that was part of another sign later in the year when the Dallas team was stranded in Philadelphia. Their plane was malfunctioned. They didn't get onto a plane after their game until midnight, which hinted at the midnight cry in the rapture verse in Matthew 25, speaking of the parable of the sheep and the goats, which is also Matthew 25. And that was a sign of being left behind. There's more prophetic details to all of that, but we'll leave it at that. Now, and that's why we need to look at ourselves in the mirror. And the point here is that you need, especially if you're a Christian, to watch arguably the most important video on this channel, which is the 23 church signs video. That video, I will explain what God is demonstrating with his big picture of signs, the message that the church needs. I can't just give the same message over and over. Furthermore, there's a lot of information. It can't be done anyway. But Dallas is also the home of the Nicolaitan doctrine that Jesus said he hates and is coming to make war on with the sword of his mouth on those that teach and have the works that are a product of this doctrine, which is Reformed theology, which is sovereign grace and free grace, which come in the packages of Calvinism and dispensationalism, and both lead to the heretical doctrine that is literally rooted in Gnosticism, once saved, always saved, because Calvinism is rooted in Gnosticism. Augustine was a Gnostic for 9 years before joining the church, and he corrupted the church in the 5th century. And so anyway, and Augustine disparaged all of the other early church writers including the ones that came well before Augustine and only quoted Augustine, and titled his writings Systematic Augustinianism, and Luther was an Augustinian monk. And Augustine corrupted the church with his Gnosticism in his latter writings. That's just, in a nutshell, what is going on here. God is very, very displeased with the church, specifically the American evangelical church that will be left behind. This is what God is communicating. And the average Christian that thinks that they're all good listening to this is likely not at this point, including those that are watching rapture videos, that are addicted to watching rapture videos nonstop and not doing any work. And that's another thing. Evangelicals have a phobia when it comes to work because of their false doctrine that Jesus said he hates. Okay? And also, Dallas is the home of this theology and the seminaries that churn out the nation's pastors that teach this theology around the country and around the world, for that matter. And pastors are the problem. That they are the linchpin to the problem. They are the gatekeepers, first of all, of doctrine, and they prevent the church from being the body of Christ. They are dictators. You're only allowed to speak when you attend one of these rituals that are so-called church, and they speak for an hour and no one else is allowed to speak to the group. And if you do, you'll be quickly escorted out, and everyone approves of that. And those that attend these pastors are just as guilty. Furthermore, Jesus forbid calling anyone your authority or your teacher or your priest or your reverend or your pastor. Jesus forbid this. He is the only master. He is the only authority. And anyone can read the Bible plainly and never ever come to the conclusion of Calvinism unless they are taught it. For example, someone in jail that comes to the faith and reads the Bible on their own will never, ever come to the conclusion of Calvinism. You need to be taught this heretical Gnostic doctrine. Okay? But also, Jesus strictly forbid preaching for money. And this is the root of the corruption in the church. Pastors that preach for money, they are committing severe sin. When Jesus spoke about the master that would prevent the thief from breaking in, and if the master knew when the thief would coming, they would prevent the thief from breaking in. He's talking about pastors because the thief is Jesus. And that's why any pastor will absolutely hate the message in this video. They don't know it. Some of them are doing a work for God, don't get me wrong, but that doesn't mean that they are what they are and what they are doing is not sin. They should not be preaching for money, and those that give their money to the pastors are just as equally guilty of this. The money has corrupted the church. And anyway, the church system, the whole thing, church, it's man-made religion. It's a ritual. It's a man-made religion. It's actually also inherited from Catholicism, which if you are an evangelical, you know is man-made religion. Well, so is your religion of going to church and sitting in the row for an hour and then whatever. So I've gone on long enough. I didn't mean to. But anyway, watch the 23 church signs video. The reason for this prophetic sign, though, the big deal here is that Dallas beat the New York Giants 40 points to 0. This is extraordinary. 40 points to 0. This means a lot of things. First of all, there was rain involved, and the flood waters in the count of Noah's flood increased for 40 days. And at the end, when the score was 40 to 0, that's when the heavy rain was when the score was 40 to 0, which is hinting at the 40 days in the flood, which means this is judgment for who? The church, because it's Dallas. What is more specifically the judgment here? Well, why the New York Giants? Giants hint at the Nephilim in the account of Noah's flood in Genesis chapter 6, before the flood, which did what? Corrupted the chromosomes, the heritage. I'm avoiding the word. You know what I'm talking about. Okay, the makeup of people, the seed of Satan. Okay, okay. So And that's why the thing is the mark of the Antichrist. And you know what I'm talking about. The thing that you can't talk about, that changes one's chromosomes. But giants are, the Nephilim are symbolism, is symbolic of what is coming, which is the alien deception. Because the truth about aliens is that, of course, there are no aliens, and they are demons pretending or masquerading as aliens. And this is the thing. The alien deception will be the big test of faith for the quote-unquote Christian. Because this is the purpose of the end times. It's to test the faith of quote-unquote Christians. This is the reason for the Antichrist and judgment coming on the world. If it weren't for that, God could end the age right now and begin the new age. The reason for the trials and tribulations is that it is designed as a test of faith. Why? Because the church is rotten, and the rot is rooted in the bad doctrine, which is the doctrine of the vast majority of evangelicals today. Okay? Now, that's why, partly why, it's related to why a large majority of quote-unquote Christians are open-minded to the existence of aliens, which therefore means that they do not truly have a solid biblical worldview. They don't, that's the point. And that's why the alien deception, because of their unrooted in the Bible worldview. They don't realize it, though, because they're living worldly lives, barely indistinguishable from other non-believers. They're living for their careers, their family, their vacations, their retirement, everything. How in the world does a Christian have time to go on a vacation? Especially if they're watching for the Lord's signs, as Jesus commanded they do. But if you ask the average Christian today if they can name one single prophetic sign, they wouldn't even understand the question. And they would miss the obvious one, which is the Star of Bethlehem. But the point is that there cannot be aliens because man is created in the image of God and is the center of God's creation. That's very clear in the Bible. That's the biblical worldview. Earth is the center of the universe, and man is the center of God's creation. Man is not another animal. It is the peak of God's creation. The animals in the world were created for man. I'll give you an example of a debate. Sorry, a debate. No, it wasn't an argument. It was a friendly debate because I approached them in an attempt to talk some sense to them and furthermore tell them the gospel. But there were these protesters that were protesting these horse-drawn carriages for tourists where I am. And I confronted them and I said, did you know that there would not be civilization were it not for horses working for people? And you wouldn't have paper for your sign that is against using horses. It's very clear. If you look at it, the horse is designed for a man to sit on. That's why God created horses. And there wouldn't be civilization without horses. In other words, what I'm saying is that the animals were created for man. But the point is that there cannot be aliens. God became a man. He didn't become a man. He didn't become an alien. He became a man. And furthermore, he didn't become an alien and die on the cross on the alien planets and hop around, hopscotch the universe, dying for the aliens' sins as well. So, in other words, if you believe that it's possible that aliens exist, you really don't believe the Bible. You haven't really thought your worldview through. In other words, you're not really living your worldview. You're not thinking about it all the time. It's like a ritual or a superstition for you. You kind of believe it. You go to church. You think you really believe it, but you don't realize that you only kind of believe it. You're not living it, and you're not engaged in the war, the spiritual war that we are in. And so, and that's why you're focused on your retire. I asked someone who was traveling around Europe with his friend, and I was like, "What do you do?" He was like, "What do you mean?" Well, Well, obviously, I mean, what do you do for the Lord? What's your ministry? Oh, I play the guitar in church. So that's the typical, anyway. So that's enough theology, I think. But you get the point, is that there cannot be aliens, and that's why the giants, and that's why God is doing this, and why there will be an alien deception that is predicted to begin on the date 11/11, which pairs with this 9, exactly 9 weeks after this Giants-Dallas game. And God does this. To confirm the signs and connections, he provides second and third witnesses to confirm the matters, as this is what is required, as the Bible says. And this is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination, and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. And one simple way in which he would provide second witnesses, if you think about it, is through pairing certain numbers together, such as 9 and 11. It hints at, first of all, the big judgment warning on 9/11, but the number 11 is symbolic of God's promises of curses and blessings, and is used in context of execution of God's judgment in the Bible. So the number 9 symbolizes judgment, and the number 11 symbolizes the execution of God's judgment. And what will be the execution of God's judgment? The alien deception, which is designed specifically to fool quote-unquote Christians that do not truly have a biblical worldview and weren't really engaged in the spiritual war and were living worldly lives and not paying attention, thinking that they were all good, and when they die, they'll go to heaven, and basically they're just waiting to die. But in the meantime, they'll live a worldly life. They didn't really get it, in other words. And God really wants them to get it. And that's why the end times are coming. This is the main reason why God is trying to wake the quote-unquote Christians up that do not get it, which is the vast majority of Christians, quote-unquote. The lazy, do-nothing church. Anyway, let's move on. And that includes the so-called, the church that isn't the mainline Protestant denominations. Get over that excuse. No, God, if there's judgment for the church signs, no, it's those heretical liberal churches that are marrying gays in their church, etc. No, my friend. It is the evangelical church. That's why Dallas. As Jesus, the church of Laodicea, and as Jesus said to this church, he reproves whom he loves. And he's very, very displeased with the American evangelical church. And the root of the problem is pastors, money, and doctrine. It's all part of the same thing, though. All right. And the purpose of these predictions is to prove what I am saying. That is the reason why God has given me a voice through these predictions. Make no mistake. If to not appreciate that is to miss entirely the point of this video. If you don't watch the 23 church signs, you missed entirely the point of the video. You might as well turn the video off. And furthermore, don't watch any other videos on this channel. You don't get it. This is a wake-up call. This is judgment for the church. That's the point of the end times. And the only prophetic signs that are being understood in such a way are being explained on this channel. That's why the predictions are being made on this channel, is to prove that this is God's true big picture of signs, which is only being explained on this channel. And okay, so let's move on. There's more. This 40-0 hints at 400. And that is a number that is symbolic in this context of the exodus from Egypt of the Israelites. They were afflicted for 400 years. That's why the number 400. And that's why, by the way, the end times is happening 400 years after the Mayflower, for another example. And there are only two nations in the history of the world that were founded on a relationship with God, America and Israel. And so that's why this connects to the predicted evacuation from Manhattan Island as a result of the predicted dirty bombs that will explode on September 25th. And this will result in an evacuation, which is what the Exodus is symbolism for. That's why this 400 number is connecting profoundly to this predicted evacuation. Okay. Furthermore, the flood was an evacuation. Noah and his family evacuated in the ark. And again, the rain came heavily at the score 40-0, which hints at the 40 days of the flood. Now, it's 15 days that connects this. That's because the 15th triangular number is 120, and which means in a triangle of numbers, the last number in the 15th row is 120, and the number 120 is symbolic of the church. Pentecost is symbolic of the church, the Feast of Pentecost, and it was 120 disciples in the upper room on Pentecost at the beginning of the church age. And so that's why 15 days here. But this is also the equivalent of 21,600 minutes, which is a number God uses to hint at the Antichrist. 666 is the number of the Antichrist in Bible prophecy. And 216, which is what this hints at, 216 is 6 times 6 times 6. The Antichrist is the 44th president, and he was born on the 216th day of the calendar year. And that's why this is also the equivalent of 4.11%, because this hints at 4 times 11 equals 44. This is also, for example, why the Antichrist was elected on 11/4 in 2008. Okay. Also, this is why the star player for Dallas, the quarterback in simple English gematria, is 16, Dak. It's kind of an unusual name, and God uses unusual names often for the purpose of figuring out what the gematria is of the name. If you don't know what gematria is, Roman letters and Greek letters and Hebrew letters are also numbers, and you can equate a word into a numeric value. And when we do this in English, for simple English gematria, the name Dak equals 16, and God uses 16 to hint at 4 times 4 and the 44th president. Okay, now, let's see. Now, also on this day, the 49ers, speaking of the Antichrist, because the second Antichrist is Barack Obama, the first Antichrist, which is more than clear in Bible prophecy, for many centuries that has been clear that the Pope would be the Antichrist. I've explained that so many other times I won't explain it again, but that's why San Francisco 49ers, because the first Pope is Francis, San Francisco. And 49 is a number in the central prophecy of the Bible that regards the timing of the Antichrist, the 70 weeks prophecy. But they played the Steelers, which hints at the thief, which is Jesus. And when the Hebrews or the Israelites took the promised land, they took possession of it. They enacted a symbolic 3 sets of 7. They marched around the walls of security of Jericho for 7 days, and then on the 7th day, they blew 7 trumpets and marched 7 times. So it was a 3 sets of 7, which God uses frequently in his signs. That's why the score in this game was 30-7. Because they will take the promised land, God's faithful, and be raptured from the Antichrist, Francis, stolen from the grip of Satan in the rapture, which is why the rapture on Pentecost in the calendar that watches for new moons on May 26th, 2024, will be exactly 37 weeks after this 30-7 score. That's amazing. Okay. And also, it is 37 days to the date it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash, which is the equivalent of 888 hours. And in Greek gematria, the name Jesus is 888, the name of Jesus in Greek. So this is symbolic of Jesus, and again, taking of the promised land. Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash. It will symbolize when Jesus said he saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven. After her death, she will be replaced by the Antichrist. Michelle Obama will become the president, and then Barack Obama will replace Michelle. Okay? Now, the number that symbolizes the rapture is 726, because the 726th word in Strong's Greek New Testament Concordance is the word for rapture. And this is an anagram, if you will, for the rapture. But this is a number that appears in the Bible, 276. This is the number of souls that were shipwrecked and were survived, as was promised by God in Acts, the book of Acts, chapter 27. And it took a while to figure out that God was using this as an anagram as well. But this was flood symbolism because it was a shipwreck, and we have this flood symbolism in its prophetic sign, which is another second confirmation, second witness. So it's 115 days, but this is the equivalent of 2,760 hours, which is hinting at 276, which hints at 726. And also the reason why this is relevant is because it connects to the date that it is predicted that singer-songwriter Paul Simon will die on January 3rd, 2024. There'll be more to be explained regarding this, and I'll make some videos regarding Paul Simon. But the main reason here is that Paul Simon wrote the song Like a Bridge Over Troubled Water, which will be symbolism for the rapture. And the church is symbolized by the number 50. This is 50 days before the predicted solar storm, coronal mass ejection that will knock the power grid out in America, which will lead to food rationing, which will lead to digital programmable currency that will restrict buying and selling food to only those who have taken the mark of the Antichrist. And that, by the way, is symbolized by the number 13, and that's why Paul Simon and his partner, what's his name? Garfunkel, had their prophetic Grammy Awards dispute in the 13th Grammy Awards. He'll die on the 13, date 1-3, which hints at 13. And this hints at the 13th Amendment, the abolishment of slavery, which is symbolism or a theme God is using in his signs, which is the theme of the Bible and the theme of life, which is slavery and freedom. If you take the mark of the Antichrist, you are the slave of Satan. Sin makes you a slave of Satan, furthermore. And also the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, the first black regiment in the Civil War, about slavery and freedom, were not paid the equivalent of the white Union soldiers, which was $13 per hour or per month. That's why the number 13, okay? And so anyway, there you have that connection. And the Super Bowl, in which it is predicted that the 49ers will win, becoming the third team to win 6 Super Bowls, making it a 666, which will identify Pope Francis as the Antichrist, is predicted to beat Miami. And this Super Bowl will be on the date 211, which hints at 2 times 11 equals 22, which is the number that symbolizes the mark of the Antichrist. Because, for example, the inverse of the mark of the Antichrist would have been a Tav mark, which in ancient Hebrew would have been a X, a Tav, which was an X in ancient Hebrew. And the Tav letter is the last letter in the Hebrew alphabet and the 22nd letter. And the mark of the Antichrist is described in the last book of the Bible, the 22nd book of 22 books in the Bible that have a total of 22 chapters. That's why the exact 22 weeks connection here. Okay? And lastly, 223 days from this prophetic sign, which is the equivalent of 32 weeks, is the day that it is predicted that will be the beginning of what God is communicating as being the zombie pandemic, the beginning of the mass demonic possession of those who have taken the mark of the Antichrist on April 20th, 2024. The reason for 32 weeks is because 32, the 32nd prime number is 131, and the 131st word in Strong's Greek New Testament Concordance is the word for blood disease, which is what one gets when they take the mark of the Antichrist. The Antichrist is the 48th president, and 223 is the 48th prime number. The Antichrist will enforce the mark of the Antichrist. That's why this connection, it's amazing, 32 weeks and 223 days, to the zombie pandemic, which is what I'm saying will be a result of taking the mark of the Antichrist. It's astounding. Furthermore, the 48th president will become the president again in 2023, which is also what the number 223 hints at, 2023. And so I believe I have explained this entire diagram now. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more. Don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media.